What's up, everybody? PDC here, and today we are going to be watching Shing versus Big Will 2024 for the DPP Invitational. Shing, I'll just do a little introduction, is a relative newcomer to DPP, but he's really made an impact on the metagame in the short time. He's a pretty active community contributor. I like his builds. He innovates a lot. He's definitely more of an offensive player. And overall, I played him a lot, especially on the ladder, and I can tell you that he is very capable. And the same basically goes for Big Will, who is more known for his ADV prowess. Again, I would characterize him as a bit of a more offensive player, and I don't really know that much about his DPP acumen, but overall, these are two players which are, I would say, solidly good players, and I would probably put them around, if I were to rank them, probably in the lower quarter or so of, let's say, like DPP starters. And next SPL, I especially would expect Shing to be a starter in Gen 4, and I would also expect Big Will to probably start playing ADV in SPL as well, considering that seems to be his metagame. And I literally played him yesterday in ADV Cup, and he is a good player. That's what I can really say. So let's go ahead and start the game. I'm going to probably try and do this with some speed, just to see. In the beginning, we see Heatran versus Rotom. First of all, like, I'm trying to cold record these matches, so Heatran could really be anything. It could be specs, it could be 4 attacks, it could be defensive with Wisp. I've ran Stealth Rock Shuka with Wisp lately. I think that's a very good set. And Rotom could be specs, but seeing as he goes to Powdon, my guess is this is going to be just Lead Rest Talk Rotom. Lead Rest Talk Rotom is good on stall because it's one of, especially if you're running a Hippo stall and you don't have, let's say, a T-Tar where you don't want to lead with your Jira, if you even have a Jira. Rotom blocks Azelf. Azelf can be a massive main for stall early on because it basically prevents any hazards from going up, and it's going to hit and do, like a 50% chunk out of something with Explosion, combined with Taunt preventing a recover. It can be really annoying. Rotom kind of blocks that because Rotom is not hurt by Explosion. Taunt is not really like a huge detriment to it because it can just T-Bolt for 2 KO, or 3 KO. But either way, Rotom's like one of the solutions stall has, especially Hippo stalls, which really, if they lead a Powdon, have difficulty with a self-lead. One of the solutions stall has to a lead self-lead. So he goes Hippo. We're going to see Flamethrower, which from doing 60, that is probably specs. And that's, yeah, okay, yeah, that's definitely specs. We're going to see a Laddie pivot. And Shing looks like he's running a specs Tran-based team. We see T-Tar come in, a great partner with Heatran on the Laddie's recover. And I imagine a Crunch or Pursuit's going to come here. There's the Reflect, there's the Crunch, yep, 32, so it's going to be probably Berry T-Tar, could be Pasho, could be Lump, could be Chople, but that Laddie's going to drop to that Pursuit. So, I mean, right away you can see why this combination works so well, because one, there really are not very many Pokemon which can tank a Specs Tran. I mean, Overheat is, powerful enough, but Flamethrower also is really strong, and I think that people underrate how powerful Specs Tran can be as a stall breaker, especially considering a lot of stalls will have either T-Tar or Laddie as their resist to fire moves, and T-Tar, is easy as it can shrug off a stab fire move from Tran, specs or not, if it's, Spadef Tar. If you're running like Scarf Tar, like that's really going to be, something you don't want to take. You're taking almost 50% from a specs overheat. Laddie is way better at taking the resist, but the problem is Laddie is also really susceptible to Pursuit. And Spadef, Hippo, and Clefable, which are like the passive checks or less, like consistent checks to Heatran. Hippo, Spadef Hippo doesn't take very much from non-boosted, Flamethrower, Fire Blast, whatever. It's still going to get 2 KO'd, or, absolutely just take shattering damage from an Overheat. Same with Clef. So, really, when you're dealing with Specs Tran, Stall's answers are going to be stuff like Laddie, or, I guess, their own Heatran, or T-Tar if it's Spadef, or maybe even Scarf. So, you can see right away why this combo works really well, and just looking at Shing's team, I mean, the rest of it, he's probably going to have a ground resist somewhere, like a ground immunity. I imagine he probably has a laddie of his own, probably some speed control. It could be like a Gengar, it could be a Starmie, because, you know, this team can be very susceptible to hazards, even with its incredible breaking power. But we're going to see Hippo come in on the Reflect. If I were Big Will, I would... Okay, yep, there's Donphan, there's Slack. I said I would Rocks, just hard Rock there, but we're going to see Donphan get Rocks up. Hippo should be able to keep Rocks up against Donphan, but Donphan can knock it off, which is a bit annoying, but not really that groundbreaking for Hippo. In comes Gara, so this is going to be an offensive team. I'm imagining that Shing... This is an interesting take on, like, the Donphan offense brand. You don't usually see it with Specs Tran lead. I've ran it with Sash Tran lead with Overheat before. Very, very similar. In fact, I played Shing on a ladder with a team exactly like that a few weeks ago or a week ago or so. So he's going to probably have a second steal, whether it is Scizor or Jirachi or Metagross is TBD. I had a build with this with Lum, Healing Wish, Lottie, and then Okaberry Scizor. I think Lum Lottie is really, really good on these builds. Particularly because when you're facing Breloom and you have a Tar, you have a Donphan, you have a Gyarados, it can get really dicey, and for offense, you really don't want to give up a free turn. So Lum Lottie can typically, you know, Breloom is going to have a hard time switching in consistently on offense. Lum Lottie takes that one opportunity that Breloom has, usually coming for free, especially on Donphan, absorb the Spore, scare it out, Draco something, T-Wave something, and then just you go back to being, you know, hitting hard with your hard hitters. Haha. But no, this is a very interesting offense team. It's actually a style I really, really like. I think this is one of the best types of offenses out right now because of Donphan, it gives it a Ice Shard priority. It also blocks a lot of setup sweepers like T-Tar and D-Knight and Mixcon from like just steamrolling down offense. And it also, you know, not only does it spin, it can provide rocks, and which it is doing here, and also it is a blockage to things like Mixed Jira or Agility Metagross that Donphan, because of its really great physical bulk and stat EQ, can just knock out the park. And that's why I really like Donphan offense, because it is something which kind of subverts what you would traditionally expect from, you know, like the good offense matchup. And I have been liking these types of builds a lot lately. So maybe you'll see some from me soon too. But anyway, we're just going to go and continue this. We see Gara. I would... Okay, yep, there's a Skarm. Probably DD or a Waterfall. Yep, Waterfall would be smart because you chip Rotom. And we're going to see a Shed Shell Skarm. I hate Shed Shell Skarmory. I think that that set is just so easy to victimize. If you don't roll into a Magnezone matchup, you're just like, look at this. Like, you know, flinch or not, like losing lefties recovery versus a DD Gara is just, or passive recovery in the light of switching in consistently to Stealth Rock is miserable. So he's going to try and avoid the Waterfall to a KOZ Roots. Shing is just going to keep throwing them out there, hoping for a flinch. And in comes the Lottie. Don't know what set it is. It could be Scarf. It could be the Lum. He goes out to Donphan. Will's going to swap out into Zong. And here we see an interesting combo that I have tried to build with in the past, but it didn't really work out that well. This is a common dual steel placement in black and white. And Jira Skarm is a very common placement in DPP as well. I run that personally a lot. Zong and Skarm you don't see as much, and I have tried to make this work almost with the exact same team. I think I actually had a Magnezone on it, so it was triple steel. But the issue is you would have to forsake Clef on this build, and that just means, you know, Clef obliterates stall if you don't have a Clef of your own, or like a Breloom or something of that matter. Like, it would just knock off everything on this team, and if it's Clef Mag, like, you know, forget about it. But the reason why this is an interesting combo is because typically, like, look, this is what you see with Jirachi as well, but dual steel is really, really hard to break for some teams. Skarm, Jira, Skarm, Zong, like, both, at least in the abstract, are really hard to deal with. The problem that I have found with Skarm Zong is that you are opening yourself up to a really high level of susceptibility to opposing stall, because Zong, especially defensive Zong, just struggles to do anything against stall. You know, it might have Explosion to lure Clef. You know, defensive Zong with Explosion is something which I think could be really useful, because people will instinctively want to swap maybe Clefin or whatever onto Bronzong, or maybe they're going to want to switch in like a Rocker or something. And if you're, maybe like a powerful Brave Explosion set or Adamant Explosion on stall, like that could be a really cool surprise. I've seen that with things like Defensive Tran on like Rose Raid builds, but otherwise I think that, look, it's something that I've thought about, because again, Bronzong is a great block to DD Pokemon. DDers, also a great block to Jira, also a great block to Calm Minders, and it's immune to hazards, basically. And it's immune to things like poison, and Para doesn't bother it to the extent of other Pokemon, but the issue is it kind of stacks weaknesses in a way which you would think it would do fine with, considering Jira Scarm is so popular, but the reason is that Jira has better recovery. Iron Head prevents it from being victimized by Clef, prevents it from being victimized by T-Tar, prevents it from being victimized by, everything, by virtue of it being able to, on principle, flinch things to death like 70% of the time. And Zong is really a victim of the inability to have a consistent recovery and not able to really flex anything offensive on these teams. It's really reactionary, and while it's a good pick, like let's say if we were running into like, well, Donphan here, it's a good pick, or like another offensive ground type, so think like SD Gliscor, which is just destructive to stall teams. It would be a really good pick there, but, again, Zong sometimes suffers from that overlap, and often I find myself just wanting to have a Jirachi in its slot, mag or no mag. So, I mean, we don't know yet. We're going to see what this says to come in store. He swaps with the Rotom on a Head Smash. That is like, oh, geez, that has got to be a max attack Donphan. That has to be a max attack Donphan. And into Hippo, into Tar. Are we going to see a Toxic? Nope. Okay. Laddie, EQ. See, I mean, he can just preserve. Okay, he's gonna Zong. He's gonna get tricked here, and there's a trick. Okay, so it is Choice Scarf. Choice Scarf Healing Wish, almost certainly. His last is probably another offensive steal. Scizor, Lucario, Meta, any of those. I think Metagross kind of makes it a little too weak to Skarmory. But as we saw, that really has not been an issue so far, especially considering this is, look, like he just easily got rocks off and also almost flinched his Skarm to death. And he's back in now with Heatran. So his last has got to be Clef. And again, if he just Flamethrowers here, like, yeah, okay, he now sacks Rotom into Flamethrower. EQ on the Gara, this is just, Flamethrower from Tran is going to obliterate everything. We see him take 67 from that, but he can't even keep these rocks off the field because Donphan can just spin, pretty much indefinitely now. Waterfall comes out again on Skarm. Easy pivot to Tran as he roosts, and now Tran is probably just going to claim another Flamethrower. So, yeah, he goes to Zong, and again, just sacrifice. This is, being kind of a blowout. Goes to Clef, we see Tar, there's a knock, and T-Tar should be able to clean this up. At this point, you can just, like, superpower Fire Blast your way to victory. Also, of course, Crunch, and that's going to be it. So, this is where you kind of see, in my opinion, the deficiencies of Zong. I feel like if you had a Jirachi here, Jirachi is a lot better at pressuring these types of teams, and its offensive capability in Iron Head B-Slam, or even, like, I've considered, like, Iron Head, or, like, Iron Head Grass Knot Psychic, or Iron Head Fire Punch Psychic, to block Breloom and Steals. That would be pretty useful here, because you could hit Donphan, you could hit Tar, you outspeed Gara, you can protect on Lottie, on Tran. It makes it easier to scout, but, yeah, this stall did not work out that well for Big Will this game. Maybe there's some possible way for him to pull it out, but I don't see that happening with Healing Wish in that Spectrum. At this point, yeah, there's a Draco that's gonna die, and Clef is, even if it was Calm Mind, I would say it'd be impossible for it to pull out. There's the Healing Wish into Gyarados, into S-Toss, and I mean, if I'm Shing, I just Waterfall. That's doing 44. Yeah, Encore, T-Wave, whatever he does, it's not going to be enough. And again, his last is probably a strong steal. Doesn't really need to get to that point though, and he kills it. So here we see a really, classic example of offense played well versus stall. I don't really have any criticisms of how Shing played this, and in fairness, he didn't really need to go to any lengths to outplay Big Will here. But this is an example of how really, really minute choices on how you decide to construct your stall team can matter. So the build that Big Will brought is not bad per se, it's not, but the problem is you're relying too much on Lottie Clef to take on, I would say, mutually both fire and water types. And Dual Steel, while I think defensively as a backbone can be really excellent versus like the standard types of hyper offense, so think like triple DD, and even then it has its flaws, it's going to struggle against things like, Tran or, even Donphan gets really, really annoying. When your team is overly reactionary, where your best offensive character is really just like Rotom, it can be really tough for you to win games. And again, this is why Jirachi is really great on stall, whether it's, again, Magneton or Magnezone or no Magnezone, because Jirachi, no matter what, can force, pressure on a team beyond hazards. This team has basically one exclusive win con, and that's going to be hopefully keeping hazards up, which, again, it can normally effectively do, but that didn't really happen this game because Tran just put so much pressure on the team. So that's going to be game one. Again, I'm trying to also not just commentate the game, but explain a little context for why teams work or don't work. Not that I think this is a bad team. I just think that it's a good example of how one slight variation, one slight swap in a Pokemon choice from a typical team structure can be really, really crucial. So let's go to game two. I'm just going to go ahead and start this one. So now we have Big Will over here. I'm actually going to switch the viewpoints so we're consistent. And we have two Jira leads. So I'm going to imagine just double rocks or body slam. Fine too. He probably has rocks on that Jira. Or he could be running stall again, and that could be body slam, Iron Head, U-turn, or whatever. We're going to see a pert swap, Scarm, so now it seems that Shing is running stall. And here we see the fated Jira Scarm. I shouldn't say that he's running stall because he has rocks on Jirachi, and typically you would have rocks on something like Hippo, or Gliscor, or even Clefable, or Titar, or whatever your rocker of choices. But these both could be this could be an offensive or defensive team from Big Will. For example, this could be Paraspam with Fling Light Ball Swampert, or just lefties, SR Perp. It could be offensive Perp, it could be defensive Perp, it could be the Jira Perp Mag build that Crystal I saw used yesterday in DPP Cup, which I was really, really fond of. I thought that was a really cool innovation of bringing back a bit of an older build. We're going to see a Whirlwind into a Titar, so that is not good because that's taking serious damage early. But if we're looking at teams right away, one thing I can say is if you are someone who is acquainted with DPP, this could be a really good exercise in just thinking about, well, what does he have? We've already seen 3 Pokemon revealed. We know that this is likely not a hard stall team. It could have been, but we know it's likely not now. We know that there's a good chance that this team has a spinner. Why? Because Jira Body Slam, Pert, and Titar, these 3 Pokemon are, again, just so easily chipped by spikes, and, T-spikes too. Going without a Starmie here is going to be a real big detriment against, when you're facing stall. And I imagine this is going to probably be like a big 6 type of build. What I mean by that is it's probably going to be like a Starmie, a Breloom type of build, maybe a Zapdos. It doesn't need to be that. It could be Starmie, Gara, it could be Donphan, it could, even be like Gliscor. There could be a Magnezone Starmie. It could be Mag, although I imagine he probably would have not swapped Swampert into Scarm there if he had a Mag, but, this is a good practice run of seeing, well, why can we, or how can we identify what type of team my opponent is running even though we've only seen three Pokemon. And that's like the #1 key, identifying what type of team you're dealing with, because that is going to affect what Pokemon you want to conserve. Without Team Preview, you know, in those types of gens, it's really, really instrumental to get good at that skill. But we're going to see so that's going to be Shed Shell Scarm from Shing, and we're going to see a T-Tar on... Ooh, that is banned. That is a banded T-Tar. Superpower is doing 30. I assume that Shing expected a Fire Blast. I would not have T-Tar'd on T-Tar. I would have Jira'd there. You know this is likely... I would not expect Dragon Dance T-Tar on this team necessarily. I would think he's going for, like, this could be a mixed utility Tar or a band, even a Scarf set. I would have just went Jira. Fire Blast is not doing enough to where you would want to jeopardize your own Tyranitar, because again, while like, yes, you are potentially only taking like 10% from Fire Blast and Sand, T-Tar is often, you know, might be a Scarf Tar, is so instrumental to these types of teams. I don't like Shing swapping into T-Tar. I think he has better options, especially because, again, what we just talked about, look, this type of team structure is likely going to have a Zapdos or a Starmie. And pursuing the Starmie here is, like, really, really big. And seeing T-Tar take that much damage early game, I don't like that. Again, this is how we should be viewing DPP. I don't know the teams. I don't know exactly what any player is thinking. So maybe I am wrong. Maybe there's a reason he did that. But on a swap like that, you'd want to go to Jirachi. And it's more likely than not a Jirachi, which is defensively oriented enough that it can take a Fire Blast from Mixtar, or, you know, even a CB Superpower. So Superpower is going to do not much to perp. We're going to see a double Superpower, 20 or so, not doing much. Probably a Roar into Lottie, defensive Lottie, I imagine. Probably Reflect, could become Mind. We don't see an item, so this is interesting. This could be Specs or Scarf, probably Specs. 31, likely. Oh, it's Orb. Oh, that is interesting. I have not seen Life Orb Latias in a long time. But Shing's just going to swap out from that, so this is interesting. But we do see Jira get a Wish Off and Protect into another layer of spikes. Okay, this could be really annoying for Shing. For a Big Will. Body Slam on the Scarm parried with no leftovers recovery. It's basically dead. Okay, not really, but, you know, that's really annoying for Scarm. We're just going to see some Iron Heads here. I wonder what... Oh, okay, alright, yeah. So he's going to be forced to Roost. No Para on that turn. Zapdos comes in, guaranteeing, you know, the Starmie. I'd say almost 100%. We're going to see the Jirachi here, and it's going to get T-Waved, which... I think I would have just went for a Discharge there. We're going to see probably a Body... Oh, a Thunder. Okay, so some Para action here. Thunder, this could be Thunder, Grass Knot, Iron Head. I like that as a lead set with lefties. T-Bolt is going to do 33, so this is likely like a max HP Jirachi with some speed. Okay, so it's Fire Punch, Iron Head, and he gets the burn. Okay, that is really going to annoy that Laddie, or annoy that Zapdos. Laddie's going to come in. If it's Life Orb, I imagine it has Roost. Shing really, you know, this could be really good. He's gonna, hardcore hidden power fire. Okay, that makes me think this might be 4 attacks or something along those lines. Let's see if he roosts here. Nope, no roost. So this is likely without recovery, 4 attacks, Laddie. But that Jira is going to be in trouble. He gets the additional second tech. He could swap out here. There's not much of a shame in swapping here. He goes for a Tect. I think I would have went for a Wish there, depending on the roll. But Jira's going to go down. And in comes Flygon on Celebi. So again, the last Pokemon here has to be... It must be Starmie. And Again, this is another situation where I'm not 100% sure about the direction of the team. Shing's team has been pretty telegraphed. This is a double dragon type of offense. I imagine this is Mixgon. Mixgon Skarmory is, again, a classic combo, especially with Scarf Tar. And the Life Orb Lati is an interesting innovation on it, so that's kind of cool. Double Life Orb Dragon, he's probably like Surf. I would wonder if he has like Grass Knot on it, or maybe he has another move for him to use. But overall, like that is interesting. I think dual Life Orb Dragon, potentially Earthquake Lati, maybe even, or like maybe it has Healing Wish. That could be interesting. There's a lot of things you could do with that. Even Thunderwave. Thunderwave would be cool too. That could probably set up a swap into Mixgon really, really well. It also could be Seabegon. It probably isn't Scarfgon. I think that you could maybe run Scarfgon, but I would probably prefer Mix on this build. It just is too good to pass up with hazards. Celebi here, I don't know about. I know that Big Will's going for an obvious Paraspam build. He has Body Slam, he has probably T-Wave Celebi, T-Wave Zapdos, probably T-Wave Starmie, and CB Pert. My issue with this is that, yes, T-Wave is excellent speed control. Yes, you with Pert and probably physically defensive Celebi and physically defensive Zapdos and potentially, physically defensive Jirachi, you don't 100% need a Scarfer. Why? Because you're kind of already blocking so many setup sweepers. But I do still worry about speed control. I mean, this is just like a personal hesitation, but I have been careful about how I set up my teams to where they do or they don't need a Scarfer. And T-Wave is not always the best way to secure that. But either way, we see Celebi come in, and he swaps it out into Zap, and Zap is going to probably just pass away this turn. We see Flamethrower, which is interesting. Me's going to probably come in here if he has a Starmie. Yep, there is Starmie. And if I'm Shing, I just Draco. I would never expect Ice Beam on this. I would just Draco here. Okay. Recover on... Does he have a Ghost type? Rotom, maybe? No, Jirachi. Alright. Spin into Thunder? Into... Nope. Uh-oh, that's not good. Well, it's not really bad either, because I think that he probably could get Hazards back up. Honestly, really easily. But this does give Pert a chance to recover, and Celebi is suddenly a little bit more scary, and so is Starmie, because, honestly, Shing's team, I wonder what his last is, but like I said, early on, without Scarftar, look, this is like, again, you should expect Starmie on this, and because you should expect Starmie, you should be really careful of letting your Scarftar go. Rocks are going to come back up, and we're going to see Pert come in, recover, swap out the Skarm. Let's see, Roar into Ape. Okay, I understand the build here. Oh, jeez. Okay. Wow, that's unfortunate. That sucks. That's actually really, really annoying. Jeez, yeah, it really sucks. Jeez, that Pert would have been crucial, because that probably would have done about 45 to max Pert. And, while it probably would have just been sacrificed anyway to Gone, it would have led Flygon in to take 6, 10 from Orb, and then me can come in and maybe do something with Hydro Pump or Surf. So, anyway, we're going to see Jira come in. We're going to probably see a Surf from me, 27, pretty substantial damage. We're going to now see a Celebi swap. Let's see. Okay, there's Thunder. Is in a Para. Hitting Thunder, in sand through Para's crazy, by the way. Fire Punch, Burn, nope. So this Celebi could be really annoying. I wonder what the set is. If it's probably T-Wave, Grass Knot, or Psychic. Yeah, Grass Knot, Psychic, T-Wave, HP Fire. And now he's getting Iron Headed. That crit is a little bit annoying because it forces a recover probably. In comes Flygon. In comes HP Grass, or excuse me, thinking ADV, I was using HP Grass Celebi yesterday. HP Fire, we're going to see a Roost, and we're going to see a Recover from Celebi. And now is where, you know, I mean, one, Starmie is actually looking really threatening. That Jirachi has gotten chipped to a sufficient degree, and we see Grass Knot doing 40%. So, while it seems like this Flamethrower is really going to be hitting hard on that Celebi, the issue is Grass Knot hurts too. And, I mean, Starmie really only needs a pair to win. And that's Seabitar. You know, this is actually one thing I might have done is I would not have tried to fight Jirachi purely with my Celebi. I would have tried to go to Seabitar and Jirachi because I would just need to get a pursuit on it. You know, and he knows that Jirachi is like the last thing that he can have to check Starmie. You know, Skarmory that's Fizz Def with Shed Shell is not beating Starm, but especially if it's paired. So I think really what you should have done, you know, Big Will should have tried to do there is try and go for a suit or try and go for a crunch on that Jirachi while he was staying in with Celebi there. And Flygon comes in, okay, like, oh well, but you, at that point, I think you might just be able to kill it with Surf, because then you can go Celebi and play out the same sequence. That's how at least I think I would have handled it. But this is, again, you know, it's always hard to speculate when you're just watching the game from the outside perspective, because you don't know, maybe someone does or doesn't have a move. Maybe this is minimum speed Starmie, even though it's probably not, but, you know, who knows. We're gonna see just Surf, or not Surf, we're gonna see this sequence play out. I'm gonna speed this up just a little bit, because, you know, I imagine this is kind of just gonna become a little bit circular, where we see players do this, you know, over and over. Flygon, I think, beats out Celebi here, because one, it's, okay, well, there's Grass Knot, and no burn yet, and, okay. Yeah, all right, I guess now I think, you know, Big Will has kind of realized, like, look, like, I just have to try and win with Starmie. I would probably start... Okay. Starmie's going to come in, and I'm going to put this back slower speed. He's going to sack the Skarm. Yep, 48. 3 of these Pokemon are dead to a Surf. And... I mean, he goes to Jira here, right? And... there's Tar. Did he double the Flygon? Okay. You just Pursuit here. Yep. And now Pursuit does, like, you know, it's doing like 40 to Flygon. He's going to try and roost it off, which is the right thing to do. But yeah, oh jeez, that is doing... Yeah, okay. So this is a win now for Big Will. So it's a 1-1 series. And again, this is, like I told you as earlier, you know, pursuing the Jira is so key to winning with Starmie here. And Big Will eventually was like, yeah, I'm not going to try and get crit by this Flygon. I know how to win with Seabitar. So Starmie's going to come in. It's going to Surf. Interesting teams from both of them. I like Shing's build here. I can see the vision. I think triple Life Orb Hazards is cool, but I might appreciate a Ghost there instead of one of those slots. Like, maybe an offensive Rotom would do better in either the Ape or the Lottie slot. Probably the Ape slot, because, you know, Lottie, it really gives a team that needed Water Resist. But anyway, we see a bit of a reinvention of Paraspam here too. So we're going to go ahead and now go to Game 3. So now we're in a Game 3 scenario, and I'm going to go ahead and start from turn 1, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to see a T-Tar versus a Jirachi. And again, classically matchup, we see a Tran come in on a U-turn this time. Okay, so the inverse of Game 1. And we see me come in, and me is not taking leftovers. Could be Specs, could be Colbur. And we see Quag. So now this is the type of team... we know what we're dealing with on Shing's side. This is a stall team, and it's probably going to be Skarm, Clef, Lottie. That's just, like, you know, the most expected combination. Could be Celebi, although he would probably really want a Spinner if he's running Celebi on this build, because Spadef, Tran, and Quag, and Tar, that is very susceptible to spikes. So maybe he also is a Spinner. In fact, I would actually really like a Spinner on this build. You see Big Will being very shocked in the game chat at... Okay, so there's Forretress. And... Alright, so there's a Spinner. Okay, so that's the concession that Shing is making here. He wants to use these 3 mons. he knows that Skarm fans, Skarm me would be a little difficult to fit on this. So the roll compression of Forretress here is what he's doing. The issue is, of course, that Forretress kind of sucks as a Pokemon. Not like Skarm would do any better facing this Magnezone that swaps in, but the utility and longevity of Forretress is questionable sometimes. It doesn't have recovery. You have to either Wish Pass to it, or you have to use Rest, and having your spinner be forced to sleep and having it also, possess very little offensive power. Payback Earthquake is great, but it's not great coming off of, I think, like 90 base attack. So Mag comes in on the Payback, on the Gar, and are we going to see HP Fire? Are we going to see Earthquake? Nope. And there's Spikes, but now Forey's dead. And while, Big Will likely does not have Spikes. It would be very strange if we saw a Roserade on this build or something like that. But he is going to be able to keep rocks up, and, if he gets rocks up. And that should be fine, realistically. In fact, he's probably going to get rocks up here. That level of hazards is fine for this team. But, this is why Forretress, again, is just... not like Skarm would have dodged that, but having your spinner trapped by Mag is just super frustrating. And if this were like a Mag Skarm build, then that would be... Speaking of super frustrating, we see Gengar get killed by Waterfall. Jeez. So, looking at this, I've been kind of falling behind in the commentary here. This is Waterfall Quag, which usually it's either Ice Punch, Quake, Haze, or Counter Surf, which makes me feel like this, I think I actually played this team on the ladder, is Curse Quag, which without Mag is interesting. This team also... It's got to be probably... Maybe it is Celebi. It might be Celebi. Celebi Clef, could be Laddie Clef. But, again, even though I like the idea behind the build here, Tran Quag is, really potent, because as we just saw, Quag just blocks Starmie and other water moves so hard. The issue becomes, there is a lot of overlapping of weaknesses here. Breloom is obviously the first one that comes to mind, but strong ground types, Magnezone builds. Gengar got, absolutely destroyed by that Waterfall crit, but, the problem, and we can talk about this later at the end of the video as a bit of a post-facto commentary, Stall really, sometimes you just really struggle for certain things, and that's why deviating from the norm with Stall can be so hard sometimes, because the reason why Stall, more than anything else, kind of is accustomed to just, ultra standardization is because you can see how just slight deviations in it really can affect how effective it is at actually being, defensively coherent enough to block off offensive structures like this. So, anyway, we're going to go ahead and see a Starmie come back in, and I think he's threatening Trick here, or he's threatening Grass Knot. We see Lottie. We see a Spin. Okay, he's also, of course, threatening Spin. And again, Forretress. Now, those spikes are gone. So, this is really good for Big Will, but his losing Gengar sucks versus Stall. Because, even though that's Waterfall Quag, and it can do a bit more than to Gar than usual, Gar, no matter the set, is deadly versus Stall, especially like sub-split. We see Starmie come back in, good double, and there's Trick. So now Laddie's like totally, well, not totally, but Laddie's functionally kind of useless here when he has Tar, Mag, and Jira versus a defensive Laddie, which is locked into recover onto a Mamoswine. Okay, I'm gonna guess that's Scarf Jira. Mamo's interesting. Don't see that every single day. I would have expected maybe another Dragon type, but this is basically Magnezone without dragons. We see the Gar Mamo combo. I don't see Mamo very often anymore. There was a time period where I felt Mamoswine was really, really good, or at least kind of anti-metagame, and it appears that this might be one of those times where bringing it actually is going to bear some fruit. Shing's last is probably Clef. And if his last is Clef, a physically, offensive Mamoswine, not like it would be any other iteration of it, but, You know, I mean, just look at how powerful EQ is going to be here. Like, again, this is what I mean by stacking weaknesses. He goes to Quag, which is really the only thing he can go to. And again, even with Forretress alive, this would be a menace. We don't see leftovers, and EQ is 39, so that's a physically defensive Quag. You kind of need it on this team, because otherwise this team would struggle with DD Tar and DD Knight. Even if you're running Curse, you know, a lot of Quags, look, most of the special attacks you're taking are going to be like, you know, theoretically Hydro Pumps anyway, and Quag's immune to that, and it's also neutral on Ice Beams and immune to T-Bolts as well. So Quag is really in a good, effective spot for just absorbing all of those types of special moves, with or without major SPDF investment. That Earthquake is not doing a lot, though. We see a Fang, and we see a Freeze. You see, that's actually really... Because Quag actually probably would have won right there. I mean, okay, so he could threaten the trick. That's what he could do. But the thing is that if he recovers when Jira comes in, which is, you know, honestly not hard to call out, you don't even need to... It doesn't matter what item, you know, this Quag is. Because Earthquake just clean sweeps. Me probably is Ice Beam, like maybe 30 damage, 30% at most. Jira has to flinch it to death. If it gets another curse, it's killing it with Quake 100%. Mag dies, Tar dies, Mamo is dying. So that really would have been game, unless that's, you know, it could be Grass, not Jirachi. But we see Laddie now come in, and Mamo is still behind a sub. And I guess Shing goes for a Reflect here. Ice Fang, Reflect. If I am Big Will, I Quake here. Oh, and it's... Oh, it's Zapdos. Okay, well, I guess this is how... I would have Quaked there simply because... Actually, maybe not. Maybe I would not have Earthquaked there. I might want to conserve it. But I'm thinking, like, look, like he's going to try and swap... actually, no. You know what? That would have been too hasty. I think that's fine, actually. But now we see Ice Fang on Mamo, and whether or not there is Reflect up, that is going to do a lot. I wonder the type of item that Big Will has on this. Seeing it's doing, you know, it's about 60, that could be Never Melt Ice, it could be Muscle Band, it could be Earth Plate, it could be Metronome, but probably not Metronome. And also, interesting, you know, there's the flinch, but Freeze Claws is activated twice, Ice Fanging this Zapdos. And Ice Fang coming out again. Shing is desperately trying to PP stall this, but yeah. And that's going to be it. Because now I don't think it is possible for Shing to win. He's going to try and... Okay, well, Tar... Interesting what Tar that is. If it's not Scarf. Okay. And then Tran comes in, and, you know, I mean... Yeah, I mean, Shing really should have won this, because Quag was going to win that no matter what. But again, you know, here's a question, I guess, which is... I'm not a big fan of this build here, because, you know, I mean, it's so susceptible to Gar. It's so susceptible to speed. It's so... You know, Breloom is not really, I guess, doing that much to it. I assume that he might have a Clef last. It's also really susceptible to Clef, unless that's CB-Tar, which it might be. But, you know, Clef is obnoxious for this team. Maybe that's Explosion, Lava Plume, Heatran to try and remedy that. But Clef is still so annoying, and you're relying a lot on Quag to beat opposing stall. And... You know, I don't know. You know, I'm not here to criticize the players' builds that much, because, again, like, I don't know what the full pace is. There could be a million things you could do. But when I see a team like Shing's here, I'm just thinking, if I'm putting this together in a builder, I would just be, like, so anxious about its imperfections towards really common threats like Breloom and, you know, opposing Clef Stall. I mean, Jesus, like, you know, even stuff like CB-Tar gives this stuff a run for its money. You know, I mean, I do wonder. I think it's interesting, and again, like, this is matching up. I would say this matches up extremely well with Quag versus like the standard DD offenses, or like hyper offense, where it's utilizing things like sub Jira or tech Jira as a breaker. And Quagsire would just wall the DDers, as we saw it almost win single-handedly here. But, you know, I do wonder. I think you would want to have Scarftar here for at least some speed control against Starmie and Gengar and opposing Lottie. And, you know, again, I don't know what the exact item is, but it could also be Sash Lead. I've seen people run that on defensive builds. Usually they would have rocks on the lead slot. But either way, this was an interesting series to record. And I think, you know, this is I don't think any of the players particularly played bad. I think a lot of this was really determined by matchups / hacks. Shing should have won this, but that Mamoswine really pulled through. Again, wondering what the item is there. It might be Muscle Band. It could be Never Melt Ice. It might be Never Melt Ice, actually, because Ice Fang was doing a lot to zap those. And if that's max defense, which it probably is, Ice Fang doing like 60 or so that might be Never Melt Ice, which, cool. But maybe I would go for like Muscle Band or Metronome at a certain point. Metronome Mamoswine is interesting because, again, it's a Pokemon where you might just end up spamming a move over and over as your opponent recovers. So that's something to think about. But anyway, you know, for the post-facto commentary, you saw a bunch of really interesting stalls here from both players, defensive teams, and also some cool offensive teams. So we're going to see that Shing, even though he's, you know, I really wanted to see him go far in the tournament. We are going to see him knocked out early in play-ins, and we're going to see Big Will progress. But, you know, I'm sure Shing is going to be active in the background. For example, I played with him a lot on ladder, and maybe when I start playing in the main event, I will also reach out to him, and we'll see what stuff he's cooking up in the kitchen there. But overall, interesting game. Like I said, I think both players played fine. I think there were some alterations that I would have made in play, but holistically, I think that they both put on a good show. And, you know, if not for nothing, the team choice here was intriguing enough. And you always like to see a game as a spectator where you're like, oh, what's going to happen next? So that's, you know, a positive about it. But anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I'll be sure to hop on more commentaries for the tournament soon. And if you have any questions related to DPP, don't hesitate or feel nervous or something, just hit me up on Discord or leave a comment in the comments section, and I'll try and reply to it as well. I played DPP for a very long time, and I love the metagame, and I'm very excited to be a part of and commentating this tour. So anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.